The chamber is loud, but not chaotic in the way television usually shows it. This is a different kind of noise. Low voices, tight circles, staffers moving fast, phones vibrating nonstop just outside the doors. The United States Senate is not debating policy. It is bracing for impact. Then the numbers lock in. 18 Republican senators join all 51 Democrats to advance articles of impeachment against Donald Trump. Not a protest vote, not a symbolic rebuke, a procedural step that triggers a full constitutional process. The number lands like a verdict. For the first time in American history, a sitting president faces impeachment initiated by members of his own party while still in office. No historical footnote, no precedent to lean on. The Senate has crossed a line it has never crossed before. This is not about optics. It is not moral signaling. It is not an act of resistance theater. This is institutional machinery engaging at full weight. Impeachment is not a statement. It is a mechanism. Once activated, it drags the presidency into a legal and constitutional trial that does not care about loyalty, polling, or messaging discipline. That is what makes this moment different and dangerous. These are not senators looking for attention. Many of them built their careers defending this president. They voted to acquit him. They shielded him when the pressure was highest. Now they are the ones pushing the system forward. So the question that hangs over the chamber is not partisan. It is existential. What could be serious enough to fracture party discipline at this level? What evidence forces allies to choose between loyalty and complicity? Because if this is real, if the vote is justified, then this does not just threaten one presidency. It threatens the way the United States restrains executive power itself. This is not impeachment as America has seen it before. Twice already, Donald Trump faced impeachment. Both times followed the same pattern. The allegations originated with the opposition. The debate collapsed into partisan warfare, and the process ended behind a shield of party loyalty. Republicans closed ranks. The system absorbed the shock. The presidency survived intact. That model no longer applies. This time, the trigger did not come from cable news, leaked memos, or public outrage. It came from a classified briefing so severe that senators walked out unable to pretend they hadn't seen what they had just been shown. No talking points, no spin, no plausible deniability. This is the pivot point. The allegation is not about policy judgment or controversial decisions. It is about a far more corrosive charge, the exchange of national security secrets for personal financial benefit. That accusation changes everything. Policy disputes can be debated. Foreign strategy can be defended. Even reckless decisions can be rationalized. But when classified intelligence becomes a bargaining chip for private gain, the old logic collapses. At that point, the party is no longer choosing between left and right. It is choosing between action and complicity. That is why this impeachment does not fit into the familiar Trump versus Democrats frame. That narrative is obsolete. It is a distraction from what is actually happening. This is not a political fight. This is a constitutional confrontation. Not Trump versus Democrats, but the presidency versus the Constitution. And once framed that way, neutrality is no longer an option. The heart of this crisis is not the Senate floor. It is a sealed room, a SIF. No windows, no phones, no staff. Every device surrendered at the door. Entry logged, exit logged. The briefing lasts 4 hours, long enough that no one mistakes it for a formality. Inside, the nation's top intelligence officials take the floor, the Director of National Intelligence and the Director of the National Security Agency. They do not speculate. They do not argue politics. They present what they describe as grave and immediate threats to U.S. national security. This is not a slide deck for television. It is a record. Intercepted communications, corroborated timelines, financial tracing, testimony summaries, materials prepared not to persuade voters, but to withstand scrutiny, under oath, under cross-examination in court. That distinction matters. When senators leave the room, reporters note the change immediately. Faces tight, voices clipped. Several refuse to comment at all. Others use the same phrase, visibly shaken, not by rumor, by documentation. And this is where the logic of the system takes over. Congress built this process precisely to separate noise from proof. The SCIF exists to eliminate plausible deniability. Once a senator has reviewed classified evidence at this level, claiming ignorance is no longer an option. That is why, after the briefing, the debate shifts decisively. No one argues whether the conduct occurred. The argument becomes what must be done about it. From the moment the door to that room opens, the Senate loses the luxury of comfort. There is only responsibility and the consequences of refusing it. Start with the term itself. Intercepts are not allegations. They are communications that were captured, decrypted, cross-checked, and authenticated by U.S. intelligence. They are preserved records of what was said, when it was said, and who said it. According to the briefing summarized in the transcript, the intercepts place Donald Trump in direct exchanges where he explicitly acknowledges the information being discussed is classified. More damaging still, the communications reportedly connect that disclosure to demands for approval of specific business projects. That connection is the fault line. Unlike testimony, intercepts are not filtered through memory or motive. They are not reconstructed after the fact. They are the subject's own words, spoken in real time, inside the context in which decisions were actually made. That is why senators describe this evidence as irrefutable. If Trump denies the disclosures, he collides head-on with recorded communications that intelligence officials say leave no ambiguity about intent or awareness. If he claims misunderstanding, the use of internal program references and classified code language undermines that defense immediately. The national security risk compounds the problem. The material allegedly shared concerns U.S. capabilities in sensitive theaters, exposing collection methods developed over decades and placing human sources at risk. This is not abstract harm. It is operational damage. Intercepts remove escape routes. They do not argue. They do not persuade. They simply exist. And in crises of power, the most dangerous evidence is always the same. The one thing you can't disown, reinterpret, or erase: your own voice on the record. In politics, motives are often debated. In finance, motives leave footprints. According to the transcript, investigators at the U.S. Treasury traced a series of large financial transfers, some in the hundreds of millions, others exceeding $1 billion, moving through accounts connected to projects associated with Donald Trump. The significance is not any single transfer. It is the sequence. The pattern repeats with mechanical precision. A disclosure of classified information, a brief pause, then a transfer. Once could be coincidence, twice could be luck, 11 times is a system. The documentation matters. Dates line up, amounts escalate. The gaps between disclosure and payment narrow to days. This is not circumstantial smoke. It is a ledger with timestamps. And this is where every defense built around national interest collapses. If the disclosures were policy-driven, why do the proceeds flow toward personal development projects rather than state channels? If this was diplomacy, why does the money arrive in installments that resemble a payment schedule rather than an aid package or trade adjustment? Finance strips away narrative. It does not care about intent statements or televised denials. It only records cause and effect. Treasury investigators reportedly identified 11 discrete instances where classified disclosures were followed by substantial financial movement benefiting Trump-linked entities. That repetition transforms the allegation. This is no longer a question of recklessness or poor judgment. It is an accusation of transactional exchange. When financial records synchronize with intelligence timelines, the charge stops being carelessness. It becomes something far more dangerous: a trade. This case is not built on whispers. It is built on records and people who put their careers at risk to create them. According to the transcript, 4 separate whistleblowers came forward, different roles, different agencies, 2 military officers, 1 NSA analyst, 1 national security staffer. They did not coordinate. They did not share motives. Each reported through protected statutory channels designed precisely for this scenario. That matters. In the Senate's logic, whistleblowers do something intercepts alone cannot. Intercepts capture words. Whistleblowers provide context. They confirm behavior. They describe intent. They explain what the speaker believed he was doing at the moment the words were spoken. And here, the accounts align. Independent sources describe meetings where classified information was discussed not as abstract policy, but as leverage. One report, partially declassified and referenced in the articles, recounts a moment that crystallizes the allegation. A discussion of U.S. satellite capabilities, followed by the explicit condition, approve the project. That is not inference. That is intent, as perceived in real time by witnesses trained to recognize national security violations. Independence is the key variable. 4 unconnected professionals reporting similar conduct through formal channels drastically reduces the probability of fabrication. The system is designed around that statistical reality. And once the Senate receives validated whistleblower disclosures, it is bound by consequence. Lawmakers can debate interpretation, but they cannot pretend ignorance without becoming complicit. Whistleblowers do not create constitutional crises. They place the evidence on the table and force the system to choose, to look directly at it or to turn away. The rupture did not happen on television. It happened behind a closed door. Within hours of the classified briefing, an emergency meeting was called by Mitt Romney. No press, no staff, phones left outside. 17 Republican senators attended, many of them pillars of the party, many of them longtime defenders of the president. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. No one left early. Romney opened without preamble. The evidence, he said, placed them at a crossroads. If they failed to act, they would not be neutral. They would be complicit. Then the room shifted. Lindsey Graham, among Trump's most reliable allies, stood and said what few expected to hear. He acknowledged that he had defended the president repeatedly because he believed the actions could be justified as policy. But what they had just reviewed was not policy. It crossed into betrayal of the oath. That admission broke the psychological dam. For years, loyalty had been rationalized as strategy. The party must win. But the moment the evidence reframed the choice as oath versus complicity, strategy collapsed. Senators were no longer calculating elections. They were calculating history. The danger became unmistakable when senior leadership figures joined the discussion. When a majority whip or committee chair participates in a rupture, it signals that the structural supports of power are cracking. This was no fringe rebellion. The conclusion was unprecedented. Draft articles of impeachment in the Senate itself. The House they judged was politically locked. The Constitution, they argued, was not. In Washington, when defenders begin signing their names, it is not betrayal. It is the clearest sign they believe the ship is taking on water, and fast. From the moment the articles moved forward, Donald Trump was trapped inside a 3-sided dilemma with no viable exit. Option 1, deny the disclosures. That defense collides directly with intercepted communications intelligence officials describe as explicit and authenticated. Denial does not create doubt, it amplifies contradiction. Option 2, admit the disclosures but frame them as policy. That argument collapses under the weight of the money trail. Policy does not route proceeds to private development projects. Diplomacy does not arrive in installments that mirror a payment schedule. Option 3, invoke presidential declassification authority. Even if accepted, it fails to address motive. Authority does not erase personal gain. Declassification does not neutralize quid pro quo. Each argument negates the others. Together, they form a closed triangle. The strategic failure followed immediately. Rather than isolating the evidence, Trump attacked the Republican senators who broke ranks, calling them traitors, threatening political retaliation, daring them to defect. That response misreads the arithmetic of survival. To avoid conviction, Trump must prevent additional Republican defections. But every public attack provides wavering senators with moral cover to leave the fold, reframing their vote not as betrayal, but as resistance to coercion. The consequences ripple outward. The executive branch operates under suspicion. Senior officials quietly weigh orders. Military leaders hesitate. Allies question whether intelligence shared with Washington remains secure. In institutional crises, discipline matters more than volume. And history is unforgiving on this point. When constitutional pressure peaks, campaign instincts are the fastest way to lose the war. At this stage, this is no longer about Donald Trump. It is about the survival of a mechanism. Impeachment was never designed as a punishment. It was designed as a an emergency brake for moments when power breaks free from restraint. The question now facing the United States is stark. Does that mechanism still function, or has it become ceremonial? Two futures stand in front of the Senate. In the first, the system works. Evidence is examined, votes are cast, and the precedent is set, clearly and unmistakably, that no president is above the law, not even one protected by party loyalty. In that outcome, impeachment remains alive. It sends a signal forward in time. Power has limits, and crossing them carries consequences. In the second future, the system fails. Partisan arithmetic prevails despite overwhelming evidence. The lesson absorbed by every future president is simple and lethal. Classified national security information can be treated as a personal asset, monetized or traded, so long as enough senators stay in line. The national security consequences are immediate. Allies share less intelligence. Adversaries exploit the weakness. Confidence in American institutions erodes, not with a collapse, but with a slow, measurable decay. This is why the moment matters beyond any single administration. The presidency itself is on trial. So the final question is not ideological, it is structural. If power can exchange national secrets for personal gain and survive, where does the limit of the presidency truly lie? And in a system like that, who is actually safe?